The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of cutlery filled the air of the small-town café, a cozy place where mornings smelled of roasted coffee beans and evenings glowed under the warm light of vintage lamps. It was one of those places where strangers smiled at each other, and time seemed to move a little slower. But for Daniel Carter, that afternoon was about to freeze forever in memory. The moment his little boy pointed across the room, eyes wide with innocent recognition, and whispered words that would shake the ground beneath him. "That's my teacher, Daddy." Daniel followed his son's tiny finger, expecting to see one of the cheerful faces from the kindergarten staff, perhaps a teacher stopping by after work. But what he saw instead made his chest tighten. The young woman standing by the counter, wearing a faded gray uniform and tying her white apron, looked nothing like a teacher. Her shoulders were slouched from exhaustion, her eyes fixed on the plates she was wiping. Yet something about her face, the quiet grace, the sadness that lingered beneath her calm, made Daniel's pulse quicken. He didn't know it yet, but he was looking at a story that life had written years ago, one that was about to reopen an old wound he didn't even realize was still there. Before the story continues, please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and the beauty of second chances. Your support helps us share more true and heart-touching stories like this one. Daniel had taken his 6-year-old son, Leo, to lunch after a long morning of errands. It was a rare weekend they got to spend together, just father and son. Ever since his wife's passing 3 years ago, Daniel had thrown himself into work, doing his best to fill both roles in Leo's life. He was a devoted father, but the weight of responsibility had built invisible walls around his heart. Smiles came harder now. He'd learned to survive, not to feel. Leo, on the other hand, was pure sunshine. He was talkative, curious, and always asking questions about everything and everyone. So when he spotted his teacher at the cafe, it was natural for him to point her out. But the more Daniel watched, the more confused he became. Why would Leo's teacher, the kind woman who sent notes home about art projects and learning goals, be working here as a waitress on a weekend? The woman noticed the boy staring and hesitated before offering a gentle, tired smile. Her eyes met Daniel's for a brief second, and something in that look unsettled him. It wasn't recognition. It was more like she was afraid of being recognized. When she walked over to their table to take their order, her voice was soft but steady. "Good afternoon. What can I get you both today?" Leo grinned. "Hi, Miss Ava. Daddy, this is my teacher, Miss Ava." Her eyes flickered for a moment, and Daniel saw a mix of pride and embarrassment. "Hi, Leo," she said softly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Daniel gave a polite nod, unsure what to say. He noticed the small tear near the sleeve of her uniform, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and how she seemed to avoid his gaze. They ordered, and she turned to leave, but Leo's innocent chatter continued, oblivious to the quiet tension. "Daddy, she helps me read. She says I'm really good at stories." That small detail made Daniel smile, but something about Ava lingered in his mind long after she walked away. There was something about the way she carried herself, graceful yet burdened, that stirred a memory of someone who'd once carried hope and then lost it along the way. As they ate, Daniel found himself watching her work. She moved quickly from table to table, balancing trays and exchanging polite smiles, yet there was a heaviness in her steps. When an elderly man spilled his drink, she rushed to clean it up, apologizing even though it wasn't her fault. When the manager scolded her for being slow, she simply nodded and went back to work. It was clear she was trying to hold everything together, piece by fragile piece. Later that afternoon, when the cafe began to empty, Leo finished his dessert and dozed off against Daniel's shoulder. Daniel signaled for the check, and Ava brought it over with a faint smile. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the bill down. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter," she said quietly. He looked up, surprised that she knew his name. "You know me?" Her eyes dropped to the table. "Leo talks about you a lot in class," she replied. "He says you build bridges for people, that you make broken things stand again." Daniel smiled faintly. He was a structural engineer, but hearing it from her made it sound like something far more meaningful. Well, that's one way to put it, he said, chuckling softly. But as she walked away, he couldn't help but wonder what bridges she was trying to rebuild in her own life. 2 days later, Daniel went to pick up Leo from school. The children were playing, outside, laughter echoing across the playground. But when he entered the building, he saw something unexpected. Ava was sitting at her desk, head resting in her hands. A piece of paper lay in front of her, a letter. She quickly folded it when she noticed him. "Mr. Carter," she said, standing up, her composure returning instantly. "Leo's just grabbing his bag. He'll be right out." Daniel hesitated, sensing her discomfort. "Are you okay, Miss Ava? You look upset." She tried to smile. "I'm fine, just a long day." But Daniel wasn't convinced. He noticed the envelope on her desk, marked with the school's logo. "That doesn't look like good news," he said gently. Her eyes filled with tears, she tried to blink away. Finally, she whispered, "They're letting me go." The words hung in the air like a weight too heavy to carry. She explained that budget cuts had forced the school to reduce staff. Being the newest hire, she was the first to go. Teaching had been her passion, the one place where she felt she made a difference. "I work at the cafe to make ends meet," she admitted. "But I can't afford rent much longer. I've been applying everywhere. It's just been hard." Something inside Daniel stirred, empathy mixed with admiration. She wasn't just struggling, she was surviving with quiet dignity. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He thought of how she'd smiled despite exhaustion, how she treated every child like they mattered, and how life had handed her hardship without mercy. He had seen people rebuild houses, bridges, entire cities, but rebuilding a life? That was something far greater. The next weekend, Daniel took Leo back to the cafe. It was late evening, nearly closing time. The place was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of coffee and rain outside. Ava was wiping tables, unaware they'd come in. Daniel asked the manager for 2 hot chocolates and waited. When Ava finally noticed them, she looked surprised. "You're here again," she said softly. Leo insisted. Daniel replied with a warm smile. He missed his teacher. Leo beamed. "Miss Ava, I brought you something." He pulled a small drawing from his backpack, a crayon sketch of a classroom with her standing beside the words, "Best teacher ever." Her eyes filled instantly. She knelt beside him, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Leo. I'll keep this forever." As Leo ran to the counter to look at the pastries, Daniel leaned forward. "I know things have been tough," he said gently, "but I have a friend who runs a private tutoring center. They're looking for a teacher like you, someone with heart." Her eyes widened. You do that?" "Of course," he said. "You changed my son's world. It's the least I can do." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "You have no idea what this means." That night, after the cafe closed, she sat at one of the empty tables, her apron folded beside her, and let herself breathe for the first time in months. Daniel watched from across the room, quietly realizing how strange life could be, how a simple lunch with his son had led him here, watching a woman rebuild her hope. Weeks passed. Ava got the tutoring job. She thrived there. Her passion returned, her laughter came back, and even her eyes seemed brighter. Leo was overjoyed to still have her as his teacher in after-school classes. Daniel found himself visiting often, bringing snacks for the kids, offering to help with classroom repairs. Little by little, kindness turned into friendship, and friendship began to bloom into something deeper. They talked after class, shared stories of loss and survival, and slowly, their broken pieces began to fit together in unexpected ways. One evening, as they walked out of the tutoring center together, Ava said softly, "You know, when I lost my job, I thought my life was over. But maybe it was just life redirecting me." Daniel smiled. "Sometimes, broken bridges lead us to new paths." Months later, on a quiet spring afternoon, Leo ran through the park, chasing a kite that danced in the breeze. Daniel and Ava sat on a bench nearby, watching him with smiles that spoke of peace, the kind that comes after a storm. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt whole again. And Ava, once a teacher fighting to survive, had become the reason his heart remembered how to feel. It wasn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. It was about small acts of grace, the kind that heal unseen wounds. It was about a child's innocent words that had brought two broken souls together. That's my teacher, Daddy. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional, and life-changing stories to you. Special request, comment below. Do you believe that people cross our paths for a reason? We'd love to hear your thoughts.